SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're so glad you're here. This is our second instance, our second event here at Silicon Slopes, recording an episode of SaaS Therapy, which, by the way, just kicked off its third season. So we are excited about that and excited today to have some new faces around on the episode. So I will turn the time over here to Casey, who will be leading the conversation today. Todd, who is the other half of SaaS Therapy, unfortunately has COVID, so he is not here. We're glad he's not here for our sakes. But we have an excellent lineup. So apart from Casey, we have Roger Mendez from Cisco, global leader of customer success and acceleration. We have Kate Sharp, who is the director of CS at BrainStorm, who runs the SaaS Therapy podcast. We have Alyssa Sorensen, who runs customer education at Spiff, recently acquired by Salesforce. And we have Doug Norton, who is the head of CS at Bill. So some excellent leadership here right from the heart of Utah Valley to share their insights, and we're excited to get started.
Fantastic. Thank you, Deborah, and thank you for everyone joining us here in person and those online. So let's get started. I'm going to give you a little background about how I met each one of these individuals. So Roger is the most curious person I've ever met. He allowed me to cold outreach him on LinkedIn and invite him to lunch. I didn't even really know him. He didn't know me at all. And I said, "Do you want to go grab lunch?" And he's like, "Sure." So stranger danger does not exist with Roger. He's awesome, but he's been fantastic to get to know. Kate Sharp, I've worked with for countless years. She is one of the best challengers out there in the market today. If you have an idea and you think it's fantastic, she's going to agree but challenge. So she's amazing. Alyssa, I actually tried to sell to, and she's smart enough not to listen to my sales tactics. So she's probably the wisest of all the group inside of here. And then Doug, I had the pleasure of listening to him be on a panel. This is, he must do this frequently, it's a side gig for him. Just recently with Dave Blake and the client success, they ran a meetup, and to hear his insights were so impactful. So we have a great guest, a wide variety of different experiences that they've had. So Roger, I'm actually going to start with you. I just listened to your presentation that you gave at the Customer Success Festival out in San Francisco. And he humble bragged on this, but he's responsible for guarding $58 billion in revenue. And that's how he started his presentation. Now, he didn't do it in a braggy way. He said, hey, here's the metric that we are responsible for at Cisco, is how do we guard $58 billion? So, Roger, I'm going to start with you. The theme of this our podcast today is, how do I do more with less? Obviously, this is a different era in SaaS. We've gone past, where you have more resources than you know what to do with, to you might not have as many resources, but you're still asked to guard that $58 billion. So, Roger, get us started and talk us through some creative approaches you're taking at Cisco in how you're managing that portfolio of dollars.
Yeah, I would say it's a great question. I think one thing that we're really trying to establish is consistency in the framework. So being in Utah, actually one of my favorite, he's kind of a mental health coach for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and he has this thought process and this concept of wherever you see consistency, it knows that there's a system in place. And so for us at Cisco, we try to create a system that's more strategic on customer business outcomes, but also how do we scale a lot faster with the resources that we already have. And so you see this a lot in organizations where people are wearing different hats. We try to do the same with our customer success team. So we'll have the high touch motions, which is more of a one-to-one approach, right, but we also have scalability. So we actually have scale CSMs that are not necessarily assigned to accounts, but they're more assigned from a sales operations perspective. And so in the CS ops side, we're actually determining what's an actual call to action for those CSMs, so they can come in from a tactical perspective, know what they need to do, close out the call to action, know that their success measured, and go on to the next horizon. And so that's something that we're really trying to establish to make sure that those teams feel invigorated, but also we know that those resources are really dedicated to task at hand, that they know they're going to be effective.
Well, the great thing about not having Todd Kirk here is I can steal any analogies he have and I can claim him as my own. So here he has one. Oh, I guess I just gave him credit. He has one that we have. Our customers have waves. where they're excited and motivated to do something. And the goal is to be the surfboard that they can utilize to ride the wave and enjoy the experience. What we don't want to have happen is they don't have any tools, and then that wave catches them and crashes them into the rock. So I love your different approach in saying, I'm going to match my CS people with a tactical, strategic initiative versus, hey, you have 1,000 accounts, just go work with them.
Yep.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah, correct.
Is there an example you could give us maybe of what that might look like?
Yeah, I would love to. So one of the things that we try to really establish is building out what I call a total addressable market. So looking at what customers are eligible for a customer success motion. So when we start looking at our customers, we really look at them week over week on progression. So we try to say, similar to a NASCAR racetrack, like, where specific checkpoints is the customer at, so we can start mapping where our customers are doing. Like, instead of looking at customers that are getting stuck in onboarding and looking at like, oh no, what do we need to do, and being more reactive, we can say, okay, let's start mapping our customers a little bit. So one example that we did was we launched a de-risk campaign. So we looked at customers that had an upcoming renewal in the next 12 to 18 months that they spend over specific.
Wait, 12 to 18 months?
Yes.
Not 12 to 18 days.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Getting really proactive on it. Looking at customers that maybe have a great relationship with customer success already, spend over a specific ARR threshold, and maybe are missing some specific things in their deployment or adoption. And so we go back to those CS teams to say, we've done the legwork, we've done the homework, we feel like you're going to be really successful. So go ahead and reach out to the customer because of these criteria that we've established. So.
Okay, that's amazing. I've never heard that before. I love that approach. Alyssa, you're now been acquired by Salesforce, and let's say that maybe I don't even know what my initiatives are from my leadership. You were talking to me earlier about an exercise that you do at Salesforce. Will you describe that for everyone? Because I think sometimes I might not even know where to start. I know that I'm supposed to do more with less, but what are the key initiatives that my boss is concerned about? What is that boss concerned about, all the way up to the top? So Alyssa, walk us through what that progress looks like there at Salesforce.
Yeah, for sure. And knowing you, Casey, and following you on LinkedIn, I should know that one of your questions is focused on exercise. Maybe not on the fitness realm in this case. But yeah, it's been actually really cool because I think I was used to the OKR method of maybe every quarter developing your OKRs. And at least in my case, oftentimes, maybe I'm talking with my leader a little bit about it, but oftentimes you're so in the weeds of like, what do I need to personally accomplish, or what does my team need to do? And you're not really, sadly, I'll say and admit that you're not really sometimes looking at the overall business objectives and needs that are upcoming. And so with this approach, yeah, basically at the start of the year, the lead exec in this case, well, maybe I won't say his name, but our CEO, he comes up with he calls it a V2 MOM, which basically stands for vision, your values, your methods, your objectives, and your measures. And he starts and he writes that and he publishes it. And then it cascades to the next level of leadership. And then after that next level of leadership is done and publishes theirs, then it cascades to the next group, and so on and so forth. And
Wait. So if I'm an eager beaver, I can't actually get started until it cascades down to me?
You totally can, but I think it's important. And one of the reasons why this is a benefit is really then everyone becomes aligned, because when you're looking at the leader above you, and you can even, you can look at really anyone's V2 MOM, and it's just public across the company. And so if you're curious of even, hey, what's my leader's main objectives, or what's their focus for the year, you can kind of plan around that and think through how is my team individually going to help achieve those objectives. So again, it's been a really cool exercise, and I think it just helps avoid silos that can really start to develop, especially as your organization grows.
I love that approach. Now, Doug, you were telling Roger and I that you've lived in 14 different places, and I'm like, did you join the military or something?
It's painful.
And you're like, no, it was consulting. So you kind of maybe have a unique perspective with your consulting background. As you hear Roger and Alyssa speak to this, like, what are some of those things that are going through that you've been trained on in consulting? I know you're at Build.com, that's not your role, but I'm just going back and hearing this. What are some takeaways that you have from that?
Yeah, well, to take a consulting approach, then we take a step back. And you started this with more from less, and I've heard that said a lot, and especially recently, given the market trends. And I think the expectation is it's more from less, but with high interest rates, investors need quicker, higher yield on their investments, and just to be able to keep up. And so that's a challenge. But I feel like the misnomer is sometimes more with less translates to, I have to now start working overtime, I'm gonna have fewer people, and we get into this state where we feel like, okay, I need to be busy. I need everybody to see me as a busy person. And that, I don't know that that's necessarily the right way to go. Not saying we should slack by any means, but I think more from less, really, if you take if you've read Greg McKeown's book, Essentialism, if you were to apply that type of lens, it's like, no, more of the right things, less of the wrong things. And so with that type of lens, it's not so much like I have to start working overtime or we're going to have fewer people to do the same amount of tasks. It's about saying, what are the things that my team is doing that really move the needle versus the things that maybe they're doing that aren't moving the needle or could be done in a lower cost way or by other teams in the organization, so that we're doing less of the things that don't matter so that we can focus on the things that really do get us more in the end. And for, I think, many of the investors, it's more revenue and ultimately moving the needle on that. And so for teams, regardless of the organization, because in consulting you work with a lot of different companies, it's, okay, what are those things that are going to move the needle on revenue? And you can look at other metrics like CSAT or NPS, and there are loads of metrics in customer success as well. They are all indicators or predictors in one way or another of ultimately what revenue will be. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to align the tasks and the work that's happening with the outcomes that we're looking for the business.
Okay, Doug, I'm gonna go one level deeper with you here. So I'm a big believer. I'm an optimist at heart. Yeah. So I love, like, my favorite movie is Rocky. I love it. I love that he didn't have all the resources and he was still at the end of the day able to be Apollo Creed. Well, he tied the first one and then he won the next one, right? But I love that aspect. Like, I just fully believe that you can overcome any odds. At the same time, though, I recognize that if I'm in customer success or I'm in customer education and I've just got asked to do a lot more with a lot less, how do you help an individual define out, okay, these should be the things that we focus on, so I'm not doing the same thing I've always done and I'm now working late hours? How do you help someone walk themselves through that? What's some best practices you could share? And now I'm going to open that up to the group. I'd love to hear from each one of you is, what's some best practices when you've been guiding others to say, whoa, you're going too extreme. Let's maybe focus down to that, the key metrics that we need to look at. So Doug, you start.
Yeah, and this is a good question. A lot of people get very attached or associated with the initiatives that they're driving. And as you get into the metrics, sometimes those initiatives are moving the needle and sometimes they're not. And what you don't want it to be is, you're not a good worker, you're not a good, especially in a more with less type of culture, right, that can make them feel like they're at risk. And so the important thing, I think, is to say, this isn't the right initiative, or the way that we're doing it could be enhanced in certain ways. And so I think pulling it back to the data of what's the impact that we're having, where are we seeing the results, and if we're not seeing the results, let's make the tweaks or the things. You know, sometimes there's qualitative feedback that we can go off of, sometimes quantitative, and sometimes you just have to push the what do I believe button and go after the things that you have conviction for. But in any of those cases, if you see things that, hey, the initiative just isn't getting us the results that we're looking for, it's not a reflection of the person, it's to say, we can better allocate your mind and your effort in some other parts of the business that really can move the needle more for us.
Okay, was that not therapeutic? Like, I love SaaS therapy because actually, I felt I was sitting on a virtual couch right there, Doug. That was awesome. I love that take. Kate, what would you add to that? And if someone could pass the microphone, yeah. What would you add to that? What are some best practices that you would give as you coach team members in saying, hey, maybe we pull the plug on this, or yeah, let's keep going forward on that. That has the results that we're looking for. What's some of the best practices you could share?
Good question. So we're always starting something new. We're always trying to solve problems, and so there's it can feel like there's always something new, but I think we've really tried to make it. We frame this as, this is iteration, and iteration is actually a really good thing. And so we've kind of made that kind of a foundational part of our team's ideology is, we are going to iterate. We're going to try something. We're going to solve a problem. We've got some ideas. We know that the first thing we do isn't going to necessarily be the that's it. This is it. Where now it's easy going, right? And you know that probably even going into it before you start something, you can look and identify what are the risks, what are the things that are maybe not going to go well, so I can kind of have my eyes on what are those metrics that I should be really watching to see if this is going to fail. And one of the ways I would say, one of the important things to listen to when you're about to start or you are doing an initiative, something new to kind of innovate and scale is listen to your naysayers. Who, whenever you're starting something new, you have those people on the team who are like, this, they're resisting it, right? This isn't going to work, or I'm worried about this, and sometimes it's because it's change, and change is hard, and we're doing things a certain way. But often we want to listen to those things, and even if we decide to move forward, take note of those things, because those their concerns are the things you want to keep an eye on, and then just make time and plan to innovate and pivot and iterate on your whatever it is you've started. A couple months later, all right, we've been doing this for a little while. Let's look at those things that we thought might be concerning ahead of time and see how we're doing. And maybe it's not let's abandon the whole thing, but maybe it's let's define this a little bit better. Let's add some clarity here.
Clarity is always key, I think. Very, very well said. Roger, what about for you? What are some things that go to Alyssa?
Yeah, I would say going back to your analogy with Rocky, like I love the movie Creed, and if you think about Creed, he had a mentor, right, with Rocky, and really helping him align to like what was going to be really successful in some of, the areas of training and things that he did. And so, going back to Doug's point about data, we try to do that from an outcome perspective as well. So we're looking at our customers by verticalization. So looking at our customers, whether they're in manufacturing, public education, or healthcare, so we can create some outputs that give customers recommendations on like, hey, did you know that 70% of your customers in your vertical are turning on this feature, and this is maybe something that you're missing out on? And so if we can start arming some of those customers with that information and data, they can actually come back to the CSM and be more prescriptive instead of just looking at the CSM to say, where do I start? Where do I need to go? So we're trying to reduce kind of the calories that we're having our CSM spend time on, and not taking our customers really through the alphabet soup that I call it, but really trying to have them feel empowered and know that their data and insights, we're getting that automatically from Cisco.
Oh, wow. So, Roger, one more question. I want to go to Alyssa and get her feedback on this. You're in a unique role, and I don't think everybody has someone like you at their organization. Would you mind for just a second explain your role? Because some people might be like, oh, who's this person in customer success? I don't know this role. So maybe describe your role a little bit and then how you interact. Yeah,
so I am more on the CS ops side, and so very similar to a role that's kind of happening nowadays in tech, where it sounds like it's very similar to what customer success was 10 years ago, where every company knows that they need a presence in CS ops, but they're still trying to define what that looks like. So I really look at creating a strategy and methodology on how do we create customer success, how do we track what our CSMs are doing, but similar to from a sales perspective, creating a forecast back to our leadership teams to say, if a customer gets to this point of their deployment or the adoption, are they going to renew at 80 to 95% of the time? So really creating that story. So looking at it from a logistics standpoint, strategy and operations perspective. So it's actually exciting just because Cisco, even though they are a bigger company, we are pretty new to customer success. So it's almost working at a startup within a big organization.
Awesome. So if you don't have a customer customer success operations team, look up Roger on LinkedIn, ask him some questions. I'm sure he'd be more than willing to go to lunch if you buy lunch. Alyssa, what are some best practices in again, that person comes to you and says, Alyssa, I can't create 1,000 pieces of content on customer education today. It's just impossible. We're just changing things too fast. What's some best practices you give?
And just real quick, I want to plus one on Kate's comment about resistors. And something that I've realized is oftentimes those resistors are your high performers, and their concerns are actually really valid, and probably others on the team are sharing them as well. And so I think if you can kind of leverage your resistors actually and help in some way make them advocates can be super powerful. So anyway, just plus one to that comment. And then to be honest, Casey, I think part of it is really being in tune with your leader. And I'm going to kind of twist this for you, because oftentimes I will come to my leader with an idea and say, hey, I've heard among the team that this is a really big need, and hey, here's how I would potentially address it. And she oftentimes plays devil's advocate with me and says, hey, is that, is it sustainable? And do you actually have capacity to do that? And oftentimes I'm like, gung-ho and, hey, yeah, but actually, maybe we need to pump the brakes a little bit. And going back to some of these other people's comments on really looking at what motions do we have that are really impactful, and again, just kind of really thinking about is this solution that we want to put in place something that we have capacity for and that we truly can be sustainable long term, because really it's all of this is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. And I think in a lot of these conversations, what we're not saying is or we're not addressing is the burnout that can really come to play, especially when we're trying to address all these fires that we might see.
Awesome. Thank you. And Doug, as you're building out, and I don't know how you do it. So again, you could say, I just decide for everybody. But do you grab a community of people together to start to say, okay, these are going to be our key initiatives we're going to focus on. These will be the indicators of success. How do you gather that committee? Who do you work with to do it? And I don't know if you have any examples that you could actually share with us of how you do that.
Yeah, interesting one. Certainly a committee. This is, I think one of the big lessons as we lean into diversity is that everyone brings different life and career experiences to the table. They look at things differently. Everyone has a wild card that they add beyond just the job descriptions, right? And so the more we lean into those, I think the smarter we all get as a result. So definitely committee. There are different types of committees, and so within the CSM team, we're thinking about like what are kind of the freebies. What are the things that CSMs are maybe already doing, but maybe they're just a one-off. A customer asked them to do something. Years ago, we had a great example of this where a customer was asking like, hey, I don't know if I'm really getting the ROI here, and I've got my procurement team over here telling me that maybe we need to rethink some things. And so the CSM was able to get scrappy and put together a validation of ROI. Like actually went back to the original deal and was able to show like, here's how, if we do the counterfactual here and play all this out, like what your usage would have been with us and given these deal terms versus what you would have had if you would have stayed with the other option, we can show you and quantify the savings that you've had over these years. It was incredible, but it was a one-off. And so we saw it, and so I think there are freebies that happen oftentimes through customer requests or just individuals in the team that are trying to get innovative and think about how to take things to the next level. And so one of the things that we do through these committees is like, let's elevate those things that are already happening that are kind of cool, and maybe we can just rinse and repeat. Maybe it's like, okay, that was a great MVP prototype, but now how can we take this and do even more with it? So there are a variety of directions, but certainly there's one committee that starts with just your team, and then there's the other committee, which is all of your cross-functional partners, whether you're working with support or product or marketing. And especially finance is a massive partner, right? Like we talk about more with less. Well, they're the ones that are, there's often money. It's just about where they allocate the money. And you look at finance and you say, well, they're kind of the investors for the business. And they have to decide, are they going to invest the money in your team or another part of the business, right? But there's always money. And so, it's critical to be able to work cross-functionally and tell the story, show the value. So it's not just building the business case, but then it's returning and reporting on those wins. Like, did it actually play out the way that you expected it to? And because when you get wins, it doesn't just help your team, it helps them too. Like, they invested in you, whether it's finance or product, building things that you're asking them to go build, or marketing, if they're running a campaign for you with your customer base. That return and report element, helping them to be winners in their space as well, is super critical. So absolutely committees, and there are multiple types of committees you can approach it with.
So good. Man, time is flying by. So I want to dive into this next aspect, and I think we'll probably spend the majority of our time here. You're trying something new. How long do you give it? And when do you know when to pull the plug? Because it took a lot of people's effort. You had a bunch of meetings. You had cross-team collaboration. You got the naysayers involved. And they're like, yeah, we should look at this. And you finally come out with something that you're like, okay, everybody, we all believe in this. Let's go. I know you're going to say it depends, but you can't give me that answer. What would you say would be a standard length of time? What is the information you're looking for to see if it's successful? And then how do you actually pull the plug where people's, they don't feel like they're have hurt feelings. Kate, you want to start? She rolls her hand. All right, let's go.
Well, I kind of spoke to this a little bit, but I have more to say. You want to make sure that when you are starting, you are always, any initiative you're doing is tying to your business top level business goals, right? We always talk about that. We need to get to the business objectives of our customers. We need to make sure that our CSMs are also, the initiatives that we're working on are tying to our top level goals. So I think starting out, you want to be able to define ahead of time what are those metrics that you're going to be looking at and tracking. And I don't know that there's a standard level of time, except that I would say you want to set some plans to look at it, at least within a couple of months, and see. You need probably at least a month just to get everybody on board with the change and to really understand and have clarity about what it is they're doing. But definitely 2 months in, to take a look at those initial metrics and just have a plan to keep on looking at. All right, we identified these things. These are going to tie to. We see how they're tying to our business objectives, and are they doing it? What do the results say? And if they're not, I mean, we had this example. We had a kind of a project that we started and ran for maybe 6 to 8 months last year, and when some projects are really, some of these initiatives that you start are actually only meant to serve for a certain time, and that was the case for us. It was we had a kind of an initiative that we developed at a time where we had some restructuring and we needed to really scale certain efforts, and so we started this project and we're like, you know what, we've got to do something. We're gonna go do it, and we worked at it for 6 to 8 months, and we did pivot a little bit and try to refine, but eventually we got to a place where we said, you know what, this was helpful and maybe needed at that time, but it's not driving the results we want, and it's time to kind of disband that and look at doing something new. And don't be afraid to do that, and don't call it a loss. Like, cut your losses and move on to what's the next step, and what have you learned from it?
Awesome. Alyssa, what have you learned? When you're like, hey, I think we need to pull the plug, or how do you set up those parameters? What's some of the things that you look at?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious to hear from the group, because I guess my initial take is, hey, can we tweak or pivot slightly versus just completely pull the plug? And so I'm curious to hear from others if that is your similar take on it, or how do you identify if it's a tweak situation or
great question. Yeah, so should we keep, maybe we just didn't come out with the right thing at the beginning, but now we've learned some things.
Or maybe a small little change
Let's reiterate
would make the
a little
difference.
bit. Yeah, Doug, then Roger.
Okay, pivot or kill project?
Either, you choose.
Yeah, well, time frames, I don't think there's one time frame. It depends. And
I knew he was going to say it, consultants.
I know, right? But there are some things that take time to build, and maybe one way to approach it is like, is it a two-way door or is it a one-way door? And so if it's a one-way door, you have to do a lot more research up front. So are we going to invest in this massive new technology? Maybe it's a new customer success platform.
BrainStorm.
So it's like, okay, that's a big investment.
Yeah.
And once we start plugging things in, that's kind of a one-way door. We can't flip the switch. And so there's often a lot of pre-work, I think, that goes into those types of initiatives. And there's a longer-term investment horizon with that, because there's so much research, so much effort. And so those are typically multi-year strategies versus, hey, we want this product feature built out or enhanced in a certain way, or a marketing campaign or a promo that we can offer to customers. For those types of things, they're fairly quick, and typically we're looking for things within the month or within the quarter where we can start to see the needle moving. So I think it does depend.
One-way or two-way door? Okay, I can remember that one.
Yeah, marketing campaigns are easy two-way doors.
Yeah, I got that. Okay, I can understand that one. Roger, what about for you?
Yeah, I would say, especially talking with leadership, sometimes we define things as good or bad when it comes to a rollout of a new project or implementation or things that we're trying from a strategy perspective. And so I try to change the narrative a little bit to look at things as effective. And so one of the key components of success for us is I ask our teams, what do we need to do in the short term to feel like we've made progress? And so that's kind of a good indicator for us, or at least an effective one, that we can say, hey, do we continue moving forward, or do we kind of regress and kind of pivot and start looking at different things? And so I try to create an effective effectiveness formula that we use at Cisco. So it's more of like, what are our values? So like in regards to our values of like, is this aligned with sales, renewals? Like how is this going to really help improve the business? Secondly is looking at what's worked and hasn't worked in the past within the organization. And also the third one is the rules of the organization, right? So like to what Doug was saying is like, hey, if I want to build this new product feature that's going to take 18 months to roll out, I don't think it's going to be effective, and we got to pivot and do something else, right? So looking at things like that we can be more strategic in regards to how we move forward with that initiative.
Man, so much good stuff that every one of you has delivered today. In SaaS Therapy, if you've ever listened to our podcast, we always end with any good therapy session, you have to go home and apply some homework. Like, it's great that you sit on the couch for an hour and you have some therapy, but really the work is when you're by yourself and you come into this situation and you got to decide, okay, what am I going to do? So we're going to go to each one of you, and if you could give an assignment to all of our listeners, what would be the homework you would give them in regards to this topic? And it could be anything you want to talk about, but what would be that homework assignment that you would give to them? So let's just start with Roger, and we'll just go down the row.
Yeah, I'd say probably the first thing is we're talking about doing more with less and scalability. So like AI is kind of a hot topic right now. And I think AI is kind of like that blanket term where it's like it's going to solve all these problems. But I've been doing a lot more research on AI strategy. And so I think that's something I recommend looking into, just because the basis of AI strategy is having good data. And so like if you're looking at something that you can do within your organization or improve a process, like start off with something that's super basic. Like, are we all reading the same data? And so things like that, that's really opened my eyes to like, oh wow, like AI is not something that's super scary, but it's more of like, how can it be a resource and tool that helps me, but also looking at my company's organization as well. So that's something that I highly recommend.
Awesome. Kate?
Yeah, I think I'm going to stay on the theme of what I've been saying, and I would say whatever it is you're doing right now, what are your kind of newer initiatives, or maybe they're older initiatives, things that everyone is doing, that you've been doing and maybe haven't examined in a little bit, and talk to your team and talk to those that are resisting, and really listen to what are their concerns, and look for areas where maybe you do need to add some clarity. Maybe it's not a total abandonment of this thing, but what was the reason we got into this? And now listening to some of the concerns, where can we add some clarity or maybe slightly pivot to make this even more effective?
Awesome. Thank you. Alyssa?
I love that idea. And I think involved in that conversation is, hey, what's going well and what's not going well, and are there any quick wins? Because I'm a big fan of like, how can we just build momentum? And an easy way to start doing that is, identifying what a quick win would be, and go from there.
I love that. Seeing quick wins. And is there something that everybody agrees is that quick win that we could immediately put in place, have some instant success? I like that. Doug?
Well, I think all of us got the homework assignment to hit up Roger for lunch.
Excellent.
But no, for me, I'll bring it back to where we started. It's doing more with less doesn't mean working more and burning yourself out. And I think it's about focusing on what's essential, identifying that through qualitative, quantitative, or conviction measures, and being comfortable letting things go if they're not aligned with the outcomes that you're trying to drive.
Yeah, that is so hard to do. I have this goal, Doug, that I am going to dunk a basketball. I'm 5'8", I'm almost 49, and I think Father Time has passed me by in this ability, but I cannot give it up. I'm so emotionally attached. So I'm at the gym and I'm doing my squats and I'm doing my plyometrics, and I'm just so tied to this goal that I can't give it up. And so I love that concept of being able to have the emotional intelligence to try to do that and to really look at that and say, hey, okay, what is the impact and the long-term strategy of everything? So, Doug, thank you. Thank you to our guests. This was awesome. Better than I imagined. Like so many great insights, so many takeaways. For me, what my homework assignment would be is, to me, every day is an opportunity. I love thinking about like IKEA. It started as high-end furniture. And the core values, the vision, was we want people to have quality furniture in their homes. So what's the blocker to that? Well, it's the craftsmanship in which we design every one and we have to put them together. What if we gave the tools in the hands of the people that bought the furniture? We could reduce cost. SpaceX Inc., why can't we reuse rockets, right? Like Airbnb actually kept going because they said, well, there's a conference. We'll rent out our homes or our apartments and set up mattresses on the ground. And people did it. Like, there are so many opportunities in this environment that we are in that can really fuel us to go to places we never thought we could if we approach it with that mindset that everyone here has shared with us today. So thank you for being part of this episode of SaaS Therapy. I know I feel better. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by BrainStorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.